The heavy crown of the Silverclaw pack hovered not over the head of the Alpha's true fated mate, but over a fragile human girl clutching his arm. In a single heartbeat, centuries of sacred werewolf lore shattered. Betrayal didn't just break the true mate, it forged the deadliest Luna the realm had ever known. The great hall of Winterborn was steeped in centuries of werewolf tradition. Banners of deep crimson and silver hung from the vaulted stone ceilings, illuminated by the roaring hearths that fought back the biting chill of the northern medieval winter. Tonight was to be the most sacred of nights, the ascension and the mating ceremony. Freya of House Ashdown stood at the base of the obsidian altar, her posture impeccable. Dressed in a gown of woven silver thread and midnight blue velvet, she looked every inch the Luna she was born to be. Her lineage was untainted, her wolf a magnificent, fearsome creature of pure white, and for 3 years she had prepared to stand beside Alpha King Alaric of House Redfern. The moon goddess had decreed them fated mates. It was a bond woven into the very fabric of their souls, a truth recognized the moment their eyes first met during the spring solstice. The heavy oak doors of the great hall groaned open. A hush fell over the assembly of lords generals and pack elders. Lord Harrington and Baroness Croft, two of the most influential nobles in the Silverclaw pack, exchanged reverent whispers. But the scent that preceded the Alpha King sent a violent shudder through Freya's veins. It was Alaric smelling of sharp pine and crackling thunderstorms, but woven beneath his scent was something entirely alien. The sickly sweet aroma of rosewater and mortal fear. Alaric strode down the center aisle. He was a striking man, built like a fortress, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes like hardened steel. Yet he was not walking alone. Clinging to his muscular arm was a human, Lady Cecily of York. She was petite, almost painfully fragile, draped in heavy furs that threatened to swallow her small frame. Her doe-like brown eyes darted nervously around the cavernous hall, shrinking away from the predatory gazes of the assembled werewolves. Freya's heart slammed against her ribs. Her inner wolf snarled, clawing at her chest, demanding to know why another female, a human no less, was intruding upon their sacred right. Alaric stopped before the altar. He did not look at Freya. Instead, he turned to the high priest, his voice booming over the silent hall. "I present to you the future Queen of Winterborn, Lady Cecily of York." A collective gasp echoed off the stone walls. General Godric, the commander of Alaric's armies, stepped forward. His expression darkened with confusion. "My king, the fated mate, stands before you. The goddess has chosen Lady Freya. To crown a human a mortal who cannot survive the bite, who cannot bear strong pups, is madness. It is my decree." Alaric roared, his alpha aura exploding outward, forcing the weaker wolves in the room to their knees. Freya remained standing, though the sheer force of his command made her bones ache. Finally, Alaric turned his steel gaze to Freya. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a cold, calculating political ambition masked as tragic necessity. "The King of York has offered a treaty," Alaric said, his tone devoid of the affection they once shared in secret. 100,000 acres of fertile land, iron mines, and unhindered access to the eastern ports. In exchange, I take his daughter as my queen. You would trade your soul for iron and dirt. Freya's voice was dangerously quiet, slicing through the heavy tension of the room. "We are fated, Alaric. The goddess tied our spirits together. The goddess does not feed my people. The goddess does not arm my soldiers," Alaric replied coldly. He reached out, taking the ancient crown of bone and silver from the high priest's trembling hands. "My heart and my crown belong to Cecily. You cannot do this," Freya whispered, not in a plea, but as a warning. The mating bond inside her was stretching, screaming in agony. "I, Alaric of House, Redfern Alpha King of the Silverclaw," his voice echoed with fatal finality, "hereby reject you, Freya of House Ashdown, as my fated mate." The word struck Freya with the force of a physical blow. The magical tether that bound her soul to his snapped violently. A horrific tearing sensation ripped through her chest. Freya gasped, dropping to one knee, as dark crimson blood spilled from her lips, staining the pristine silver of her gown. Her wolf howled in the deepest recesses of her mind, a sound of pure, unadulterated torment. Cecily hid her face in Alaric's cloak, whimpering at the sight of the blood. Alaric placed the crown upon the human's head, ignoring the dying peace of his own soul to secure his mortal ambitions. Furthermore, Alaric continued looking down at Freya as she coughed violently, clutching her chest. To ensure the safety of my new queen, any threat to her reign must be eliminated. Freya of House. Ashdown, you are stripped of your rank, your titles, and your pack. You are hereby banished to the Dead Marches. If you are found within my borders by sunrise, you will be executed. The betrayal was absolute. The lords and ladies who had bowed to her yesterday now turned their faces away. Freya slowly wiped the blood from her chin. She did not weep. The agonizing pain of the broken bond was already solidifying into something cold, hard, and utterly lethal. She stood up her spine, straight, her golden eyes burning with a fierce, unnatural light. You have crowned a fragile glass doll in a kingdom of beasts, Alaric, Freya said, her voice echoing with an icy promise. When she shatters and your kingdom bleeds, remember that it was your hand that held the hammer. Without looking back, Freya turned and walked out of the great hall, leaving behind her home, her heart, and the man who had just sealed his own doom. The Dead Marches were a graveyard of frozen stone, and howling blizzards meant to be a death sentence for a lone, weakened wolf. For 2 weeks Freya fought the elements. Her silver gown had been torn to shreds, replaced by the stolen, blood-stained furs of a rogue wolf she had been forced to kill on her 3rd night of exile. She was starving, half-frozen, and hollowed out by the agonizing phantom pains of her severed mate bond. Yet a singular dark fire kept her walking vengeance. She did not stop at the borders of the Dead Marches. She pressed eastward, crossing the jagged spine of the Blood Frost Mountains, deliberately stepping into the territory of the Iron Fang. The Iron Fang were the sworn, ancient enemies of the Silverclaw. They were a brutal, militaristic pack of shadow wolves, renowned for their savagery in battle and their unforgiving laws. To cross their border uninvited was to invite a slow, painful death. Freya didn't have to wait long. As she stumbled into a clearing of ancient blackened pines, a dozen massive wolves materialized from the shadows. Their fur was the color of pitch, their eyes glowing like embers. They shifted into their human forms, scarred, towering warriors draped in chainmail and leather. Their captain, a hulking man named Gideon, drew a jagged iron broadsword. "Silverclaw filth," he spat, taking in her battered appearance. "You have strayed far from your lapdog, king." "Take me to Kaelin," Freya demanded. Her throat was raw, her voice raspy, but the command of a true-born alpha female laced her words, making several of the warriors flinch. Gideon sneered, stepping forward to backhand her. "You do not speak the Alpha King's name." Freya moved with a speed that defied her exhaustion. She ducked beneath his swinging arm, swept his legs out from under him, and snatched a silver dagger from his belt, pressing the blade firmly against his carotid artery, before he even hit the snowy ground. The other warriors snarled, stepping forward. "I said," Freya hissed her white wolf's aura, bleeding into the frigid air, "take me to Kaelin. Tell him Freya of House Ashdown brings him the key to Winterborn." Hours later, bound in heavy iron chains, but walking with her head held high, Freya was marched into the fortress of Ironhold. It was a stark contrast to the luxurious great hall she had left behind. Ironhold was carved directly into the side of a volcanic mountain. The air smelled of sulfur, molten metal, and raw, unrestrained power. She was thrown to the stone floor in the center of the throne room. Before her, sitting on a throne, forged from the melted swords of his enemies, was Alpha King Cailan of House Vayne. Cailan was a terrifying vision of lethal grace. His dark hair was swept back from a face that was brutally handsome, marred only by a thin, jagged scar that ran from his left temple down to his jaw. His eyes, a piercing, luminescent amber, missed nothing. He exuded an aura of dominance, so heavy it made the air thick and difficult to breathe. Freya of House Ashdown. Cailan's voice was a deep, velvet rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. The fated mate of my greatest enemy. Tell me, why should I not skin you alive and send your pelt back to Alaric as a wedding gift? Freya forced herself to her feet, despite the heavy chains dragging her down. She met the rival king's gaze unflinchingly. Because Alaric wouldn't care. He rejected me. He stripped my rank and crowned a human from York in my place. A dark, mocking chuckle rumbled from Cailan's chest. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, suddenly intensely interested. He broke a sacred bond for a mortal. He always was a politically grasping fool, but this is a fatal error. An error I intend to help you exploit, Freya said, her voice steady. I know the layouts of his fortresses. I know the troop movements of General Godric. I know the secret passages beneath Winterborn that bypass the Silver Wards. Cailan stood, walking slowly down the dais. He circled her like a predator, inspecting a meal. He leaned in close, inhaling deeply. Freya suppressed a shiver as his scent, smoke, blood, and rich, dark earth washed over her. You smell of death and heartbreak, little wolf. Cailan whispered, his lips mere inches from her ear. You speak of treason against your own blood. Why should I trust a female who betrays her own pack? Because they are no longer my pack, Freya countered, turning her head to look him dead in the eye. The proximity was dangerous electric. And because my hatred for Alaric rivals your own, I don't want asylum, Cailan. I want a sword. I want an army. I want to watch Winterborn burn to ash. Cailan's amber eyes flared. He stared at her for a long, silent moment, searching for a lie or a hidden agenda. He found only a soul as dark and fractured as his own. The corner of his mouth curved into a wicked, predatory smile. An army requires a general. Cailan murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. And a king requires a queen who understands the necessity of bloodshed. If you wish to wield my armies, Freya, you will not do it as a refugee. You will do it as my Luna. Freya stared at him, the weight of his words settling over her. He wasn't offering her a haven. He was offering her a crown forged in hell fire. A political marriage, Freya stated, testing the waters. A pact of ruin, Cailan corrected, reaching out to grip her chin, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. You will be ruthless. You will belong to the Iron Fang. And together we will rip Alaric's kingdom apart, piece by bloody piece. Freya didn't hesitate. She didn't look back at the girl who had worn white velvet and believed in fated love. That girl died on the altar at Winterborn. Break these chains, Freya commanded, a dark, wicked smile mirroring his own, and let us plan a war. A year had passed since the blood-stained ascension, and the bitter northern winds had carried whispers of a terrifying new power rising in the east. Freya of House Ashdown was dead. In her place stood the Iron Queen. The volcanic caverns of Iron Hold had forged her into something lethal. The pristine, silver-clad girl who had desperately clung to the promises of the moon goddess had been burned away by sulfur and spite. Now Freya wore armor of scaled obsidian and dark leather. Her once gleaming white wolf had darkened its fur, tipped with the color of cold iron, its eyes burning with a relentless, unnatural amber fire that matched her new pack. She had not merely married Alpha King Cailan of House Vayne, she had conquered his people's respect through sheer, unadulterated brutality. In the sparring rings of the Dead Marches, she had broken the jaws of challengers and forced seasoned Shadow Wolf veterans to yield. She had taken Kaelin's armies, a chaotic force of pure aggression, and sharpened them into a disciplined tactical nightmare. And Kaelin adored her for it. Their bond was not woven by the gentle hands of destiny, but hammered out on the anvil of their mutual ambition. They were equals. Kaelin never demanded her submission. Instead, he stood beside her on the jagged balconies of Ironhold, watching as their forces multiplied, his hand resting possessively proudly on the hilt of her sword. They found a dark, consuming passion in their shared ruthlessness, a romance built not on fated magic, but on absolute, undeniable choice. Meanwhile, a deep rot had taken hold of Winterborn. Alpha King Alaric's grand political gamble had entirely collapsed. The 100,000 acres of fertile land he had gained from the King of York were barren, cursed by an unusually brutal winter that many whispered was the moon goddess's vengeance. The iron mines were plagued by cave-ins and strange haunting wolf howls that drove the mortal miners mad. Worse still was Lady Cecily. The fragile human queen was slowly dying under the crushing weight of the pack's aura. She was constantly shivering, her skin pale and translucent, unable to digest the rich, heavy meats of the werewolf feasts, or withstand the magical, aggressive energies that pulsed through the great hall. The Silverclaw pack, sensing weakness on their throne, grew restless and mutinous. Without a true Luna's spiritual tether to anchor him, Alaric's own power was fracturing. He was prone to violent outbursts, his golden hair losing its luster, his steel eyes bloodshot and haunted by the phantom pain of the bond he had so foolishly severed. The breaking point arrived on the eve of the winter solstice. Freya stood on the precipice of a jagged ridge overlooking the eastern iron mines, the very mines Alaric had traded her soul to acquire. Beside her stood Kaelin, his massive black wolf form blending seamlessly into the starless night. Behind them, 2,000 heavily armored Iron Fang warriors crouched in the snow, silent as the grave. The Silver Ward's perimeter ends at the tree line, Freya whispered, her breath misting in the freezing air. She traced a path in the snow with her gauntleted finger. General Godric has posted sentries here and here, but they are accustomed to frontal assaults. They don't know the old smuggling routes through the limestone caves. Kaelin shifted into his human form, his amber eyes glowing with lethal affection. He wrapped a strong arm around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You constructed those smuggling routes when you were a pup, my queen," Kaelin murmured, his deep voice a rumble against her spine. "Alaric underestimated your brilliance. Tonight he pays the first installment of his debt. Leave Lord Harrington alive," Freya commanded, turning her head to press a brief, fierce kiss against Kaelin's jaw. "I want him to deliver a message to his king." The assault was a masterclass in devastation. Freya and Kaelin led the vanguard, slipping through the subterranean limestone caves and emerging directly inside the heavily fortified mining camp. The Silverclaw guards never stood a chance. The Iron Fang shadow wolves struck like lightning. There were no battle cries, only the sickening crunch of bone and the tearing of flesh. Freya moved like a dancer in a macabre ballet. Her twin silver daggers, coated in a non-lethal paralytic ash, flashed in the moonlight as she incapacitated 3 guards in rapid succession. She didn't want a massacre of innocents. She wanted to dismantle Alaric's infrastructure and humiliate his military forces. Within an hour, the camp was completely secured. The valuable iron carts were set ablaze, casting a hellish orange glow over the snow. Lord Harrington, the arrogant noble who had sneered at Freya during her banishment, was dragged out of his command tent and thrown to his knees at her feet. He was trembling violently, staring up at the woman he thought had died in the dead marches. Lady Freya." Harrington stuttered, his eyes darting to the terrifying, blood-soaked form of Alpha King Kaelin, standing protectively at her side. "I am no longer a lady of Winterborn," Freya said, her voice echoing with the icy timbre of a predator. She knelt down, gripping his chin with a gauntleted hand, forcing him to look at the burning wreckage of his king's prized possession. I am the Luna of the Iron Fang. You will return to Alaric. Tell him that his iron is gone. Tell him his borders are broken. And tell him that the ghost he created is coming to reclaim her crown. She released him standing tall as Kaelin draped a heavy black fur cloak over her shoulders. Run, little lord. Kaelin taunted, his amber eyes flashing. Before my queen decides, she prefers the taste of your heart. Harrington scrambled to his feet and fled into the dark tree line. Freya watched him go, a cold, satisfied smile curving her lips. The war had officially begun, and she held all the winning pieces. The siege of Winterborn did not last a month, or a week, or even a day. It lasted precisely 4 hours. The Silverclaw pack was entirely unprepared for an enemy that bypassed their legendary silver wards completely. Freya knew the ancient forgotten catacombs beneath the castle, the secret passages originally designed to evacuate royalty during ancient wars, while Alaric's weakened forces manned the outer walls, bracing for a frontal assault from the dead. Marches, Freya and Kaelin led an elite strike force of 500 shadow wolves directly up through the crypts and into the very heart of the fortress. The Great Hall of Winterborn was exactly as Freya remembered it, yet entirely different. The crimson and silver banners were frayed, the hearths burned low, and the air was thick with the scent of fear and decaying magic. Alaric was sitting upon his throne, arguing desperately with General Godric, when the heavy oak doors exploded inward, shattering into 1,000 splintered fragments. The room fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Freya strode through the shattered entryway, her obsidian armor drinking in the dim light. She looked magnificent, a terrifying goddess of war and retribution. Beside her walked Kaelin, his broad sword drawn, radiating a dark, suffocating alpha aura that immediately forced the remaining lords and ladies in the hall to drop to their knees in submission. Alaric of House Redfern. Freya's voice rang out clear and sharp as shattered glass. Your reign is over. Alaric stood slowly, his face drained of all color. He looked utterly broken. The magnificent golden Alpha King she once loved was gone, replaced by a hollow, exhausted man. Behind him, huddled in a pile of furs upon a lesser throne, Queen Cecily let out a muffled, terrified whimper. Freya. Alaric breathed, taking a faltering step down the dais. His eyes widened in disbelief and a pathetic, desperate spark of hope. The severed bond inside him pulsed weakly. You survived. You came back to me. I came back for my kingdom, Freya corrected harshly, drawing her sword. The scrape of steel against her scabbard echoed ominously. And I did not come alone. General Godric, ever the loyal soldier, drew his weapon and charged with a furious roar. He didn't make it 3 steps. Kaelin moved with blinding speed, sidestepping the strike and delivering a crushing blow with the pommel of his broadsword to the back of Godric's neck. The general crumpled to the stone floor, unconscious, but alive. Kaelin stepped over the fallen man, planting his sword into the ground and crossing his arms, a silent promise, to the room. Interfere, and you die. Alaric stared at Kaelin, realization dawning on him. You allied with the Iron Fang. You mated the rival king. You betrayed your own kind, Alaric shouted, trying to summon the remnants of his Alpha Command. But his voice cracked. I betrayed nothing, Freya roared, the sheer force of her voice rattling the stained glass windows. You stood upon that altar and sacrificed our sacred fated bond for dirt and stone. You banished me to freeze to death. You brought a mortal into a world of magic, poisoning both her and your pack. I survived, because I had to, Alaric. And I allied with Kaelin, because he recognized the queen that you so carelessly discarded. Alaric's shoulders slumped. He looked at the trembling lords, at the defeated general, and finally at Cecily, who was weeping uncontrollably. He had lost everything. The political alliances had failed, his pack despised him, and now the ghost of his past had arrived to execute him. "Please," Alaric whispered, falling to his knees before her. "Freya, I was a fool. I see it now. The goddess cursed me the moment I took the crown from your head. Spare Cecily. She knew nothing of our laws. She is innocent in this." Freya walked slowly up the dais, stopping just inches from the trembling mortal queen. Cecily flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the killing blow. Freya stared down at the human. She felt no jealousy, only pity for a pawn moved by greedy kings. "Pack her belongings," Freya commanded over her shoulder to the terrified servants hiding in the alcoves. "Provide her with an escort of my personal guard. Lady Cecily will be returned safely to the King of York. She is not a wolf, and she will not die in a wolf's war." Cecily sobbed in profound relief, nodding frantically. Freya turned her attention back to Alaric, who was still kneeling on the cold stone. She pointed the tip of her sword at his throat. "I should take your head, Alaric," Freya said softly, dangerously. "It is the law of conquest. Kaelin holds the right to slaughter you where you kneel and absorb your pack into his own." Kaelin remained silent, watching her with dark, blazing pride. He was giving her the ultimate gift, absolute agency. This was her vengeance to exact, her justice to deliver. He would support whatever choice she made. "But death is too swift a mercy for what you did to this pack." Freya continued, her eyes narrowing. "You stripped me of my titles and banished me to the dead marches, expecting the ice to consume me. So I shall grant you the exact same courtesy." Alaric's head snapped up in horror. "I, Freya of House, vain Luna of the Iron Fang, and rightful conqueror of Winterborn," she declared, her voice echoing with absolute, unquestionable authority, "strip you of your crown, your titles, and your wolf. You are hereby banished to the dead marches. If you are found within the newly united borders of our kingdom, by sunrise you will be hunted down like a rogue." She reached out and snatched the bone and silver crown from the floor where it had fallen from Cecily's head. "Take him!" Freya ordered her shadow wolves. Alaric didn't fight as the massive warriors hauled him to his feet and dragged him out of the great hall. He was a broken shell of a man, his legacy entirely dismantled by his own arrogance. The great hall was completely silent, save for the crackling of the hearth fires. Slowly, one by one, the surviving lords and ladies of the Silverclaw pack dropped to their knees, bowing their heads in deep, reverent submission to the Iron Queen. Freya turned to look at Kaelin. The rival king walked up the dais, a rare, genuine smile softening his rugged, scarred face. He stopped before her, reaching out to gently trace the line of her jaw, a tender gesture that contrasted sharply with the surrounding violence. "A brilliant victory, my ruthless queen," Kaelin murmured, leaning down to press a soft kiss against her forehead. "Our victory," Freya corrected, sliding her hand into his. Together they turned to face the kneeling assembly. Freya did not place the crown of Winterborn upon her own head. Instead, she threw the ancient relic into the roaring fire of the central hearth, watching the silver melt and the bone turn to ash. They would not rule by the old broken laws of fated magic and political deceit. They would rule a united, unstoppable kingdom, forged in iron shadow and a dark, unbreakable love. Did you enjoy Freya's ruthless revenge and dark romance with Kaelin? If this medieval werewolf drama kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and share the video with your fellow fantasy lovers. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss another epic tale of betrayal, power, and ultimate redemption. What should happen next? Let us know right below.